Tijd voor een update. Om te beginnen herinneren we Jim Rogers aan een uitspraak die hij begin 2008 in Tegenlicht deed.
And I wonder if you remember this one.
Huge will go bankrupt. You will see many mortgage companies going bankrupt. Some have already started going bankrupt because people will not pay the bills. You're going to have some Wall Street firms losing huge amounts of money. It's going to ripple through the American economy, and the American economy is going to have a recession. It's not the end of the world, we hope. We hope it's not the end of the world. We hope it's just a recession, which people have had many times.
What do you think? It's the end of the world or it's a recession?
It's a recession. It'll start out as a recession. Ask me in 2010, then I'll tell you if it's the end of the world or not.
So here I am.
Oh. I didn't expect you to come back, for goodness sakes. Well, it's not the end of the world, but when things get worse, probably in later 2010 or 2011, it's going to be even worse than it was in 2008, because what's happening now is just papering over the problems. There's nobody's addressing the problems. Nobody's solving the problems. They're just putting Band-Aids on the cancer patient, and that's not going to solve the problem. So the next recession will be worse than 2008.
Were we somehow close to the end of the world as we know it, or how would you judge that?
Some people, it has been the end of the world. Iceland or Latvia. I mean, some countries essentially have gone... These are small countries, and they don't affect a lot of people. But the next time around, you could have the UK going bankrupt. You could have bigger or more major companies. We've had Dubai go bankrupt. Well, Dubai's got a lot of money. They don't have a lot of people, but they got had a whole lot of money. So it's getting bigger. It's snowballing. Vietnam is just going through, not quite the end of the world yet, but Vietnam's got 75 million people. They just devalued their currency. They're having serious problems. So it's spreading, and it's going to spread to other countries, bigger countries, and you're going to see, in Europe, Central Europe, you may see the Ukraine go bankrupt. And that would affect several European banks, several Dutch banks, as a matter of fact, and several Austrian banks, Swiss banks. So more and more people are going to get hurt pretty bad.
You would agree that the banks robbed the citizens? The banks robbed the citizens.
The governments robbed the citizens. The governments took the governments took the money from the citizens and gave it to the banks. When the banks got in trouble, they all went to Washington and to London and said, save us. And they did. You know, the U.S. government, let's use that example, the U.S. government saved maybe 1 million people. Well, there are 300 million Americans. I'm one of them. You know, we all have to pay taxes to bail out 1 million people on Wall Street or in the financial community. No. The banks, the government took the money from the 300 million of us and gave it to the million banks. Yes, that's theft. But it's the governments who stole the money. Instead of the government saying, fail, listen, you're the ones who made all those mistakes and did all those crazy things. Why should we bail you out? Why should 300 million Americans have to bail out 1 million guys who made some really stupid mistakes? So it wasn't the banks that stole from the people. It's the government that stole from the people to give to the banks. I mean, so the whole system is weakened. That's called socialism. You should recognize that. You should recognize that system.
Is there a way to avoid the next crisis? Or are we already too far down the road?
We probably are too far down the road now because they've already propped up a lot of companies and bailed out a lot of people. It's hard now to go to... I don't want to name names, to some of the people that have been propped up and say, hey, we're going to take the money back and now you have to go bankrupt. It's pretty not very practical to do that at this stage. So I'm afraid we're probably too far down the road, and therefore things are going to be worse the next time around. You know, the governments around the world and central banks have shot a lot of their bullets. They're not going to have that many bullets left the next time they have to step in to try to save people.
How would you describe these bullets that they still have?
They have very few bullets left. They have printing presses is essentially all they have now because many governments have borrowed staggering amounts of money. The United States government and the United States Central Bank have, I mean, the numbers are just, they can't even calculate them. partly because they've got so many off-balance sheet, you know, things they've guaranteed and they don't know how big they are. They're huge guarantees out there. So the United States has essentially shot all of its bullets. The UK has shot all of its bullets.
Like everybody else is going to look for the sign when the thing is, you know, when the next crisis is on our doorstep. What do these signs look like?
Well, I want to remind you that basically, if you ask me, this is all part of a continuum. Yes, the stock market went up. You know, the stock market, the American stock market is around 10,000 right now on the Dow Jones average. It could go to 30,000 if they continue to print money. But you're going to be you who think you've made money because you think the Dow Jones has tripled, but it's tripled in worthless paper. So we're not going to be better off, and that's part of what's happening now. The stock market has gone up, but the value of the money is deteriorating. Look at what's happened to the price of gold or silver or some of the commodities. They've been very strong because people know that the money is becoming less, the paper money is becoming less and less valuable. So you may think that if the stock market goes to 20,000 or 30,000, you're better off. But you're not. The stock market's up a lot, 50%, as you point out. Unemployment's up. Bankruptcies continue. Bankruptcies continue to increase in the United States. So people are not better off. The stock market's better off. Stockbrokers are better off because they got all the money. And that's not a good system. That's socialism. Socialism for the rich. That's welfare for the rich.
Why should we believe that capitalism as such would, you know, get us somehow out of this mess?
Well, capitalism could get us out of it, but capitalism is not being allowed to work right now. Had capitalism been allowed to work, we wouldn't be in this situation now. If back in 1994 or 1998 people had been allowed to collapse, we wouldn't have had the prosperity we had in the early part of this decade. On the other hand, we wouldn't have the collapse that we have now. We had an artificial prosperity. Now we're having an artificial decline, if you will. That's government interference. That's not capitalism that caused that. It's the governments that didn't let capitalism work the way it should. But let's look. I'm defending capitalism, but don't think that I don't know that capitalism has serious flaws and serious problems. But had the government stayed out of the way, the market, we would all be in better shape right now. Probably by 2011, maybe even later in 2010. You know, you can only paper things over for so long. I would suspect that this time next year, I will be getting very worried if I'm not already, if it hasn't already hit. We will probably have currency problems, crises in the currency markets sometime between now and our next meeting, or maybe during our next meeting. And those currency crises or semi-crises will lead to the next downturn in the economy and in the financial markets. So I would urge you to learn about agriculture, and I would urge you to learn commodities. I'd urge you to learn about commodities. I have here silver. You can learn about gold. You know, let's see, what else do I have here? Sugar, you know, agriculture. So you should learn about things like the commodities, and you should learn about currencies, because we're going to start having more currency crises. Dubai may be the first. I mean, Vietnam devalued its currency recently. Brazil was having currency problems 2 weeks ago, problems in their currency market. They made it worse, what they did. Vietnam has not addressed the problem enough. So you're going to see more and more currency problems, and therefore more and more economic problems. In 2011, 2012, the economies will be worse than they were in 2008.
And the currency problems, they occur first in the so-called emerging markets.
It's usually the way it happens. Usually someplace we're not thinking about. Suddenly, we're not thinking about it because it's a small place. Not many of us think about Latvia.